Welcome, everybody. Today is January 12th, and we're going to talk about getting paid. I put this presentation together this morning at 5 a.m. So let's see what I put. I think it's good. We'll find out. Everything I put into this presentation, I think about every single day. So it came right, it just flowed right out of me. And so I think it's a good session. This was based upon some conversation we had with the IC topic chat last fall. And I forget when and where it was, but people were just concerned about how, and maybe it was something that came out of the ICTIG, conversation, the E group, the listserv that we have. I think a lot about how to make sure we get paid, because if I don't get paid, then I don't have a job, and neither do the other 9 of my employees. And so these are really important things. And I actually spend an inordinate amount of time on accounts receivable. And so I'm going to just tell you everything I know. And then I'm really going to be even more interested to hear from all of you about what you do and what you have to add. So let's see here, find that one. I always like to bring up my father when I talk about accounts receivable. My father passed away nearly 2 years ago. If you guys have been with me for a while, I actually did sessions for the IC topic chats from Mexico, where he lived. And so he was a independent consultant. He owned Feldman and Associates. He did accounting work on oil and gas, and I really don't know what he did, but it's kind of like nobody understands what we do either. So it's the same sort of thing. And he would always say, you know what the most important consulting skill is, right? And I would go, I don't know. Client relationships, knowing your content, being connected to people, and he would say, nope, accounts receivable. Of course, he was a CPA. And he was right, because at the end of the day, are we a hobby or are we a business? We need to be able to pay ourselves to continue to do the work that we do. We spend a lot of times talking about contracts and pricing our services, and those are all critical. This is the stuff that follows on. I do want to make a point and say, I'm going to be talking about this from our perspective for Goshen Education Consulting. We overwhelmingly serve educational organizations. Many of them are public. They are either a school district or a university, or they're a not-for-profit university, which operate just like the public universities, at least for the accounts receivable piece and accounts payable piece. We only have a couple nonprofits. Overwhelmingly, our contracts are multiple years. And so that's just, I tell you this so that you understand where we're coming from. I don't have as much experience with short-term contracts. We do short-term contracts, of course, and I have lots of ideas on that. But we are fortunate, and it's very much part of our approach and our business model, that we help people get grants, write ourselves into them, and work with them for the rest of our lives. I mean, literally, I have people that I've been working with for 12 years since the start of the firm, and I will likely be working with them or the people who come after them with their organizations until I leave this business, because that's what we do. We develop good relationships. But anyway, those and over time, because I have good relationships, getting paid becomes easier. So that's our situation. So we have to start with being professionals, right? At the beginning, when we initiate our relationships with people, we are professional individuals. We have consistency with our approach with our folks. We have fidelity to our process. We model the professionalism that we expect from our clients. And all of this builds trust from the start. If you have, if you say you're going to do something, you do it. This is your fidelity. We expect that a lot of us evaluate on fidelity of our clients, and so we have to model that for them. And so this is super important. When I set up an initial relationship with people, I set up a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU. It lays out what we're going to do, and usually they don't have to pay me anything, and that's the great thing. They're getting lots of value out of their experience with me. But that also sets up the idea that we are a professional organization, and when we get to the point of charging you, you will anticipate it, because I'll be talking about it a long time before it happens, and when it happens, nothing should be a problem. Shouldn't be. We'll get to the rest of that in a second. Once you initiate a relationship, you're initiating a contract with these folks, right? Because that's what we do. We have contracts. Go see the contract session. You need to have a contract. If you don't have a contract, refer back to that other session. The things that you need to make sure you're including is an invoice schedule. Critical. I just had a meeting on Tuesday with some clients. We're working on our second year with them, and they loved our contract. And the thing that they remarked on was, we love this invoice schedule. I'm like, thank you. I love the fact that you love the invoice schedule, because that's what we intend to do. So there won't be any surprises. We include late payment penalties. And I meant to look this up, at what our late payment penalty is. I put in ridiculous numbers, because the truth is I never, ever want to have to issue a late payment penalty. I just want to scare people into paying me, because I don't want to have to go into that trouble. But I think it's something like 1% per month compounding after 3 months or something like that. I think I had 5% in. You might want to look up what other people do. I think I put in 5%, and then I actually had a lawyer scratch that out, and they put in 1%. So I think that's what we use. But regardless, there should be consequences if they don't do what they're supposed to do. And you need to make sure you include a termination clause. And certainly Susan Wolf has talked about this in the past, that when you're reviewing your contract, make sure that you have an out. And the typical out is both you and your client both can choose to leave a contract with 1 month's notice. And then there's usually other language there. But the long and the short of it is, if things aren't working out, you can't stand these folks. If they're not paying you, you need to have the ability to get out of that contract. And hypothetically, they should pay you for the other work based upon, all the other things. So you've set up the expectations. You're a professional. You've set up your contract. You set up the schedule first. So the next thing you need to do is invoice on your schedule. Duh. Okay, so I say that, but people are like, well, I didn't want to, because and then I'm like, no, you said you were going to invoice on April 1st, invoice on April 1st. But I didn't quite finish the project that was in mid-March, and they're pushing back. I don't care. You said you were going to invoice on April 1st, invoice on April 1st, and tell them what you're doing, and tell them the reasons why X, Y, and Z isn't done. We have my staff and me, we all want to get paid every month. We don't get paid when the project gets finished. We get paid every month. So you need to invoice the schedule and set up that relationship with your clients right away. If you are invoicing on deliverables, well, take a step back and think about that for a while, and why you want to keep doing that, because that can be a problem. I understand why you do it, but I try and separate deliverables from an invoicing schedule. And as long as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, we can get paid on time, and they don't always have to be in sync. That's my perspective on these things. And it's really important, because there's always going to be a thing that pops up. And usually it's not you, it's usually them. And if you can't get paid because they're pushing you back, and you set up this relationship, it's going to continue to happen. So you need to get paid on time, because, well, your mortgage is due, people. It's important. When our invoices are due to go out, we get them out within the first week. We try. Wouldn't it be nice if we put everything out on the first day of the month? We're not quite that good. We're as good as we can be. But it is the priority, and Emily knows this, and she's smiling right now, because we do this within the first week of the month. And that way we hypothetically can get paid within 30 days, which is when they're due. Doesn't always happen, but once you get kind of a flow going, then it happens. A really good practice, Gail talks about this. A lot of people do this. We do this with most of our projects, not all of our projects, but we include a period update report with our invoice, meaning we'll call it quarterly reports. And usually it's not necessarily a quarterly report in its truest sense. Sometimes it is, but it's a kind of an invoice report. It's this is what we did for the last quarter. This is why you're paying me. And that often serves in place of the deliverable that you feel like needs to happen, but it's not happening because of this and that and the other detail, and because the client pushed back and somebody's out on maternity leave and all the other things. So we do have an update report. So there is something connected to the invoice that demonstrates that this is why they should be paying us. And sometimes our clients need that so they can justify it to whomever else needs to be a part of their approval process. It's really important that you understand your client and their accounts payable process. And I think I put in here, like, send the accounts payable clerk or professional cookies. I don't think I put that exactly, but that's a really good, get to know them. You should understand if they have an excessive approval process. We work with a lot of school districts and they get grants from the Department of Defense or from the US Department of Education or the National Science Foundation, just like everybody else. But despite the fact that everything's been approved and all things contracted and it's gone through all that process, every month, some of my school districts still have to put my invoice to them for $1,000 up for board approval. And so I can't get paid until the board gives their rubber stamp, and trust me, they don't care about that $1,000 yet. It's part of their process. So a lot of my folks will take 6 weeks to pay me, and we're on as fast a schedule as possible. Understanding their process, understand when they need things to go into their board packets or whatever review process they have, if there's something there. Also understand whether, if you're working with a larger organization, if they have a purchase order process, and you want to include that purchase order number on your invoice, because if you don't, you'll hear about it. It helps them with the payment process. You can see how that works. Oftentimes, make sure I didn't put this in here. When you send your invoice, if it makes sense, copy that accounts payable person, whoever it is, so that they know this is coming. This gives them like a little, alert to make sure that this is going to happen. It's a really good idea. Again, get to know those people. They're wonderful people. They're usually underappreciated. And if you go visit the clients, stop in and give them a coffee mug with your company's name on it, and be really nice to them, because trust me, nobody's nice to them, because they get yelled at. They're just underappreciated, underpaid, and these are really important, good people who are trying to do their best. And they usually very much believe in the mission of the organization that they believe in, that they work with. And, they appreciate every little bit of love you give them. Notice the first time you set up a contract and the first time you ask for an invoice to be paid, it might be slow. We've had a couple of that, and I'm sure Emily is thinking about all of our clients that just recently paid us for the first time, and we started invoicing them in like September and October, and we just got paid. And there's a couple I want to update you about, Emily. We did just get paid. This came in the mail. I use this reference with my staff. It feels like, particularly when you're first setting up your first payment, usually it's just the first payment. Never after you've set up and you've got things working, you've got like a clog in the system. They're trying to give us money, and we're on the other side of the pipe. We're just hoping they can figure out the way to clear that clog out. And once we get it flowing, then the money flows straight through to us the way it's supposed to, and then things work. But oftentimes there's a clog in the system at the beginning, and it just hasn't begun to flow yet. Oh, there's the clog. You want to focus on the clog. So for us, our clogs are often, is the contract in place? Are we copying the right accounts payable person? Does the client know how to pay an invoice? I mean, simple stuff. Oftentimes our clients are first-time principal investigators, and they don't know what they're supposed to do because they haven't been told. So I think it's important to set up a good cop, bad cop. In our circumstance, that is, Emily is the good cop and I'm the bad cop. I got her laughing. See, isn't that great? Emily is, if you receive the videos from her, she's a super nice person, and that's a great person to work with, and everybody likes her because she's super nice. And so she sends Happy New Year stuff to people and with the invoice, and she gets to be the good cop, and I have to be the guy who comes in later to follow up. So just because we've got a good separation of administrative activity in our office, Emily does take care of a lot of our invoices, and they get sent out from her. There's some really big ones that I take care of, but for the most part, she does almost all of them. And she has a good relationship with these folks. She's taking over the relationship that I've developed with a lot of these folks, and that's great. So she sends out the first invoice. She'll follow up after 30 days. Sometimes I'll get involved then if I feel like I need to be, but for the most part, she'll do it. And then after 60 days, I will follow up. And this is all set up through QuickBooks. QuickBooks reminds me when things are late. This is actually an internal reporting thing that I pay attention to. What do we have in accounts receivable? How much are in late accounts receivable? And we want to keep that number pretty low, because if it's starting to escalate, then we know we've got bigger problems. We stop work after 90 days. You could probably make a case for stopping work earlier. We have a lot of patience with our clients because it's usually not our clients that are the problem. It's usually something in their organization that's outside of their control. But at a certain point, you do have to stop. And I have lots of stories along this. We had one university. Our clients were trying to pay us. The people in the dean's office were trying to pay us. Nobody could figure it out. We got to 3 months, and I said, guys, we can't, I know you have deliverables. I know you have work due. We can't continue to work with you until you pay us. And my clients were the first ones to apologize. And they're like, we're doing everything we can. It's out of our control on it. And they're like, we completely understand. You shouldn't work right now because you're an operation, you're a business. So they respected our professionalism. It was it's hard. And we've had to do this a couple of times recently, and it kills me. But at the same time, I've got to send the message that we can't do things and be an operation. We can't work for you and not get paid. We've had to fire clients. So here's my 5.5 invoicing ideas. I like my 5.5 ideas copied from a book. Always remember to remain professional. You don't need to escalate, because if you start getting nasty, you start sending mean messages, you not inconsiderate emails, that's going to come back and bite you in the long run. So just follow your process. Set up a process and follow your process, just in the way you would expect your clients to follow through on the work that they're supposed to do that you're evaluating. Start with contract, of course, absolutely, positively, and that contract outlines everything, including the payment schedule. That payment schedule should have terms and penalties, things like that. We expect to get paid within 30 days. After 60 days, there's a payment penalty, a late payment penalty. Know your client, understand them. I usually say, listen, if you can't pay me in 30 days, it's not that big of a deal as long as you talk to me. Let's open up the communication channels here. If I know it's going to take 45 days because something has to go through a review process that's outside of your control and you've got to put it in the board packet, that's fine. We understand. And actually, here's another thing that happened. I had one client recently say, I'm sorry it took so long to pay you. Can I just pay you up front for the entire year? And I was like, you absolutely can do that. And to them, we have a long-standing relationship, and they're like, this is just too much of a. I've had this happen a couple of times. There's actually some people probably will even talk about how they've created incentives for others for advance payments. Like, you want to pay me up front, I'll give you a 5% discount or whatever it is. We don't do that, but that's something that could be in your best interest, because if you can get ahead on payments, then you can get ahead on other things, and you can put that money into good use. And that's what accountants will tell you too. Fifth and a half, make sure you have a consistent follow-up, consistent and professional follow-up but you also need to follow through on your contract penalties. You need to stop work. Anyway, so that's my big ideas here with regarding to getting paid. Next week, I see Becky Garros here. She's going to be talking about coordinating remote teams. Jessica Sickler, I don't know if she's here, but she will be joining them. And this is a session that they did at the Meet the Pros. In 2 weeks, Jennifer Jewis is going to talk through her book, this book review that she's done on that she's going to discuss designing and leading life-changing workshops. A lot of us do workshops, so really good. I'm going to do a niche identification session. We do this every year, the core topic in February, and then we will have a subcontracting fair February 9th. All right. With that, I'm going to stop the recording and we will get into the chat function.